On this special episode of the ASC Podcast with John Goehle, recorded live from ASCA 2019, we make some first observations about the conference this year, talk about pathology results, discuss the importance of properly documenting and performing anesthesia consents, and talk a little bit about risk assessments. We do want to note that the quality of this recording is different than our normal recordings because it's recorded using remote microphone equipment. We'll do our best to make sure you can listen to it, but please bear with us.
Welcome to the ASC Podcast with John Goehle, a bi-weekly podcast for anyone interested in the freestanding ambulatory surgery industry. This episode is sponsored by Ambulatory Healthcare Strategies. The ASC regulatory environment is increasingly challenging, but organizations that outsource their regulatory oversight to ambulatory healthcare strategies have an edge. AHS works with ASCs to oversee their quality improvement, risk management, emergency and infection control programs, run their meetings, develop education programs, and always be prepared for surveys. Welcome to episode 53 of the ASC Podcast with John Goehle for Tuesday, May 14th, 2019. We're recording live from ASCA 2019 at the Gaylord Opryland in Nashville, Tennessee. This is Sue Cronkite, Senior Nurse Consultant with AHS, and I'm here with John Goehle and with Alex Borneman, Director of Operations for AHS.
So this can be awkward because we only have one microphone, so we're going to have to move the microphone around between people. We're using a portable recording device here, so let's hope the quality is good. We are actually at this beautiful Opryland hotel here. So what do you think, Sue? First time here?
It is beautiful. It looks like you're outside or you're in some type of a greenhouse. There's just beautiful plants everywhere. We actually are sitting outside, so it's a little bit quieter. And you kind of walk out, you go, now is this really outside or is this still the inside outside? But yeah, it's just really beautiful.
On the way to our room, I kept looking behind me because Sue had stopped and was taking pictures of every indoor plant that is here. So, Alex, you're here with us also. Your first time also at this place. So, what do you think?
Yeah, I definitely can't tell which area is inside, which area is outside. But both are beautiful.
Right.
Yes.
I heard there's running water, but there's so much greenery, I haven't seen it yet. I can hear it and smell it.
A waterfall.
Yeah, you can smell the water inside. I guess that was an issue not too long ago for them.
Yeah, in 2010, I believe, just after one of the ASCA conferences, the place was flooded as a result of high water in the area. So we're recording this special episode to be very short, just to kind of remind everybody that we're here at ASCA 2019. And if you see us around, please say hi to us if you know what we look like. If not, look at the pictures. And so Lori Rodericks was with us just about 10 minutes ago, and Christina Benton, very dear friend of ours. We were all having dinner together, and Judy D'Ambrosio, and then the only three people that decided to do the podcast were us. So that's who you're getting. I did want to kind of go on record. So this was an interesting week. On Monday morning, I got a surprise phone call that one of our centers was having a survey. And so I had to rush to New York City and then end up having to change my flights around so I could get here in time. But the survey went very well, as they always do, obviously, with our company. But there were a couple interesting things that I thought it might be good to remind, our listeners of these things and just kind of note that these are important issues that surveyors look at. So probably one of the more major issues that comes up during some surveys and came up during this one was making sure that the physicians sign off on the results of the pathology. And I mean, I think everybody agreed that if the patient is found to have some type of cancer or a diagnosis that needs to be treated, that the physician needs to note in the record that they had had that conversation with the patient. But really the standard, even though the standard is not terribly specific, the standard of care and the expectation is that anytime a pathology is done on a patient in a surgery center, that the physician does sign off on this document. So one of the common comments that people make is, well, wait a minute, the physician gets a copy of the pathology report, so why do we have to document in our records? Well, and the simple answer to that is that we are a facility, we are regulated by CMS, we have accreditation standards, and all of those state that we need to close the loop to make sure that any pathology is taken out of the patient, that loop has been closed, and that we have documentation that the patient has received the notification of whatever the results were. So just a quick reminder of that. Another thing that's been coming up recently, and I'll probably turn the microphone over to Sue a little bit on this, is the issue of consents. Because what we're finding sometimes is the anesthesia consent, which is a relatively new issue. I mean, we used to combine in almost all of our centers the anesthesia consent with the surgical consent. But really, we're moving in the direction of having a separate anesthesia consent. And what I've been finding coming into some of our newer centers that, we're just taking on is that sometimes the patient is signing that anesthesia consent, believe it or not, at the reception desk before the patient has even had a conversation with the anesthesiologist. And then the other thing that I find sometimes, even when I'm a surveyor on an accreditation survey, is that I'm not actually seeing the anesthesiologist actually having a conversation about that. So we do want to remind our listeners the importance of the anesthesia consent and getting the documentation. So do you want to talk about anything from the nursing side? Because I think what happens here is that the nurses are sometimes the person that actually has a conversation with the patient, and that's not right.
Well, I think in a lot of centers or hospital, anything, they often will have the patient sign the consent before they talk to the doctor, and really that's almost falsifying because they're saying, no, I have no questions. I've had a chance to answer the questions, and they're told, you can ask them when you see the doctor, but they shouldn't be signing that if they haven't had a chance to talk to the doctor.
Right.
But they really need to talk to the doctor and really go over those things before they get prepped for the procedure, before any medications or anything, but
right.
Just really giving them the chance to ask the questions, and then the physician signing the consent as well as the patient.
We also need to reemphasize the important thing here is that informed consent is not a document. Informed consent is that conversation that the doctor or the anesthesiologist has with the patient. That's what the true informed consent is. The consent document, which is signed by the patient and the doctor, that's documentation that conversation occurred.
And I think then if you look at it that way and you just hand them that paper and say, well, just read through it briefly, like, it just doesn't make the patient feel comfortable enough to ask questions. Sit down, really have that conversation in a comfortable, conversational way, and then if the patient is comfortable, then you send the paper to them. Just, always give them a chance to ask questions. You're going to avoid problems later if they know what to expect and what their possible problems and options are.
So during the survey, one thing that was brought up is all the risk assessments. So luckily, we had really good documentation of all the risk assessments that were done. And this is probably the first survey that I've had where the surveyor actually asked to see each of the risk assessments that we're doing now. So, Alice, can you just talk a little bit about the HVA? We've talked about it before, and the NFPA 99, those two are risk assessments. They've been around a while, but not everybody knows about them. Just want to talk briefly about those two risk assessments and the importance of doing them, and maybe quickly how to do them.
Yeah, sure. And actually, there will be some really good speeches this week on both of those, which I'm excited to see what they have to say as well. But for the HVA, what's really important for this is taking your center into consideration. These need to be specialized for your area and for the current risks going on in the world at large, in the U.S., and your city and your state. You need to take all of that into consideration, and in the history of the center too. So, if flooding has been an issue in the past, you rate flooding higher, items like that. And even talking to your community, if you're a new center, talking to your community and seeing what have been issues in the past, looking at statistics to do an in-depth HVA. And making sure that you have some real good results from the HVA is important, meaning you need to be able to do follow-up from the HVA. It should tell you what you should do for the rest of the year, because this is an annual risk assessment. What drills you should do, what you should be adding to your training, if you need any new policies, or if you need to do any enhanced levels of mitigation. For example, for like active shooter, one level of mitigation could be you install new security measures, either cameras or a security button for the front desk. We find that the front desk is often at the front line for that sort of event. So those are the types of things to take into consideration. With regards to the NFPA 99 risk assessment, that's one that is a little bit more in depth. You are going to need your facilities manager, you're going to really need your administrator as well, a nurse, at least one nurse, probably your nurse manager. And you need this in-depth, diversified group of people to do this in order to really take patient care into account, and also the systems and how they relate to each other. The NFPA 99 risk assessment goes into electrical, water, HVAC, all of the different systems that go into the surgery center, med gas. So in the end, it's a numerical system that you're rating how likely a negative outcome is to occur for the patient if there's a failure of the system. But you need all of those players to really determine that.
I think the important thing to remember with NFPA 99 too is that it uses the justification for all of the testing that you do, like electrical testing. It really sets the tone for all the stuff that we already do. And NFPA 99's risk assessment has been around for a long time. It's only really recently that they've been asking to see, a real document that documents that whole thing. Alex, another thing that came up during this survey, and I know you work on this, we'll just talk about it briefly, is the wet room analysis, which, this is one of those weird things that has to be done every single year. So a wet room assessment needs to be done in order to determine whether you need to have GFI outlets in the operating rooms. So even if you've decided to put the GFI outlets in the rooms, believe it or not, you still have to do the risk assessment to justify the fact that they're in the rooms, and you have to do that annually. Now, it sounds a little counterintuitive here that, you've already decided to put them in there, and once you've decided to put them in there, nothing really is going to change that decision. But they are looking for that document. They're looking for it in your records, and also being reported to the governing body. So just a reminder of that. That came up during this survey, too. We had it. It's just that often they don't ask for it.
And the risk assessments have to be approved by the governing body at some point?
I don't think that's what it means. With the wet room assessment, that is one that has to be reported to the governing body, or approved. I should say decisions made based upon that. Mm-hmm. I read into the risk assessments that they're part of the quality improvement process, and then through that, report it up to the governing body through the minutes of that.
Okay.
But we do typically, for our clients, have the governing body approve all three of those risk assessments, and the infection control risk assessment as well, just to be on the safe side.
Well, and then infection control risk assessment actually becomes the goals and objectives for the next year for the center. So those were the things that I thought we wanted to talk about very quickly, from our most recent survey here. Let's just kind of finish up by talking a little bit about the sessions that are coming up. We're recording on Tuesday night. Hopefully I'll upload it before midnight. And then Wednesday is it's actually the opening day of it, but the actual first session isn't until I think it's like 5 o'clock, 5:30 in the afternoon. We do have the pre-conference sessions. I'm doing the CASC review tomorrow, which is preparation for the people that are looking to take the CASC review course. Alex, which session are you going to?
I'm going to both the HHC and Joint Commission accreditation sessions. It's always good to refresh ourselves.
And with all the knowledge that we have about each of those areas, we learn something every time. So, okay, I think we're going to end with that. Again, just a reminder, if you're here, make sure you say hi to us. We'll be carrying our microphone around. Who knows? Maybe we'll get a couple listeners to chime in on what's going on. I'm just going to leave this the way we record, whatever happens. So, signing off here, and hope to see you on the floor. Take it easy.
John, Ambulatory Healthcare Strategies is really growing fast. We've been adding employees steadily over the past 12 months. Can you tell the listeners what's been happening?
So clearly, this podcast has been very popular, thanks, of course, to you and me, because of our wonderful work here and our infectious, I don't know if I should be using infectious personalities in a podcast here about infection control and various items, but definitely we're enjoying doing this, and certainly the word is getting out about the great things that we're doing at AHS. So recently, we added infection prevention consulting to our services and mentoring of infection control preventionists in the organizations, and that's being headed up by Lori Rodericks, who is our newly certified CAIP individual. So she has the Certified Ambulatory Infection Preventionist certification now, and she's always been doing infection control for us, but now she's got this new title. So she can do ongoing infection control consulting, particularly if you don't have a qualified IC person on staff. She can help you in following up on infection control issues. She can do mentoring of infection control staff, and she can do infection control and sterile processing competencies. And we've also enhanced our life safety services by adding Jim Masters to our staff. He is a life safety surveyor, and so he joins Alex Borneman, who is our director of operations, to be able to do various life safety surveys and consulting on life safety issues, as well as probably the most important thing is follow up on life safety citations. That's a very difficult area for many organizations to be able to deal with. You know, what happens when you get a life safety citation? How do you deal with that? So we now have that ability. And of course, our unique retainer-based regulatory services, where we help keep you on top of all the ASC regulatory requirements and always make sure that you are survey ready.
This podcast is an educational and operational tool and is not intended to be a comprehensive resource for all the rules, regulations, and standards that an ambulatory surgery center must meet. The advice provided should not be considered as, nor does it constitute legal advice or opinion. When reviewing specific situations involving legal and regulatory issues, attorneys and other professionals should be consulted. This has been a production of Eden Group Development, all rights reserved. We would like to thank this week's sponsors. First, Ambulatory Healthcare Strategies, one of the nation's leading regulatory compliance and financial oversight firms. For a free consultation, contact John Goehle today at 585-594-1167 or through email at info@ah-strategies.com. And Eden Group Development, which publishes ASC Regulatory Compliance Series, the ASC industry's leading books including the Survey Guide for ASCs, a guide to the CMS Conditions for Coverage and Interpretive Guidelines for Ambulatory Surgery Centers, and Ambulatory Surgery Center Governance, a guide for ambulatory surgery center owners and governing body members. These must-have books are available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble or directly from the publisher at reg-books.com. That's reg-books.com. If you're interested in advertising or sponsoring the ASC podcast with John Goehle, please email us at info@ascpodcast.com. We would love to hear your questions and comments. Please email us at comments@ascpodcast.com.